Welcome to the Society of Our Lady of the Most Holy Trinity's video podcast featuring Father James Flanagan, SOLT founder.
This teaching is called Living Encounters with Christ.
I went to a seminary, Holy Apostles. Did any of you go to Holy Apostles? Well, Holy Apostles was a seminary, and I couldn't get in. The rector of the seminary wouldn't let me in, you know. So I said to this president of St. Joseph's in Hut, I said, do you know the rector of the seminary down at Holy Apostle? Oh, she said, yes, I know him very well. He owes me many favors. And so I said, oh, would you use one of the favors? Would you go down and ask him if I could come and talk to the seminarians? Because that was the only source we had for seminarians in those days. We didn't have any colleges, we didn't have any schools or anything. And so anyhow, of course I will, I'm sure he'll do that for me. And so she went down because he couldn't refuse it, you know. So I went down and he gave me an hour to talk. But then he talked, see, for 50 minutes. So that he figured I couldn't do any damage in 10 minutes. So anyhow, I had 10 minutes left to talk, and then the session was over. And so anyhow, I talked to the seminarians, and there was about a dozen of them wanted to talk to me, and about coming into Our Lady's Society. And so he was beside himself. The next morning, he didn't know this. The next morning he asked me at Mass, we were celebrating Mass, and after Mass he said, were any of the seminarians interested? And I said, yes, Father. He said, how many of them? I said, well, there were 12 of them to begin with. He swore like a trooper. Those stupid kids! They don't know what they're doing! You know, and he was swearing. I said, Father, calm down. You know, he had only given me 10 minutes, but they all wanted to see me and talk about their callings and vocations. And that's what I talked about. I didn't talk about come to the society. I talked about their callings and vocations. And I could go on and tell you all kinds of stories, but then I won't get this. In fact, I'm behind time now. Well, you're identified as church. When you're a missionary, you're identified in the church to evangelize in the grace and vocation proper to the church. This is the vocation of the church, the mission of Jesus. And that's what you're continuing. Now, the church finds herself at the beginning of the threshold of the third millennium. And the urgent needs that result from the mission of evangelization today calls from a new program. Okay? And that today can be defined as new evangelization. That's the program. To transform the world. And this is the vocation of the church. The church earnestly desires to encourage the members of God's people living in America. The Holy Father appeals to them to commit themselves with a new ardor in new methods and expressions. And what is that? New evangelization. We're starting with the encounter with the living Jesus Christ. And that's why I'm using these gospel realities to bring you to that. That's the foundation of this new program, this new evangelization. That's what you've got to bring people to. Then they'll go off into conversion, communion, and solidarity. Those are the three manifestations of these living encounters with Jesus Christ. This is the program. This is what the Holy Father, Pope John Paul, gave us. And he gave it to America, as I told you last time I spoke. Now, if you take up this, you must cooperate in carrying it out, in accepting this mission. You got to accept it in your heart. Not just in your mind, but in your heart. Because you got to put everything into it. You can't just do it superficially. You got to give it everything you got. Now, new evangelization must be clear. And so it's got to be clear in your mind what new evangelization is. It's an unequivocal proclamation of the person, the living person of Jesus Christ. That's what new evangelization is. It's a proclamation, unequivocally, of the living person of Jesus Christ, as it was with Zacchaeus, as was it with Samaritan women. And we'll show you others the same reality. So this is how you begin. And this is the core, the center of it, is the person of Jesus Christ. Not reading about Jesus Christ or knowing about Jesus. It's Jesus Christ himself. Now, what therefore will you do? You preach his name, his teachings, his life. I have come that you may have life and have it more abundantly. Anything you ask the Father in my name, he'll give it to you. These are the words of Jesus himself. The sense of the promises that Jesus has made. As I told you, God doesn't make vows, he makes promises. And that's why the priests and the seminarians make promises, to become like God in those promises by fulfilling them, as God fulfills his promises. And his kingdom. You preach that all the time. You preach the fullness of the Paschal mystery. Everybody has to go into this Paschal mystery. You have at least 12 members of Our Lady's Society who are going into the Paschal mystery, and God is going to take them to himself very, very soon. They're going to go through the death of the Paschal mystery. Not just the life and the sufferings, the death and resurrection of the Paschal mystery. We all have to go through that. All of us. And this is what you preach. Jesus living his Paschal mystery. The good news of the prime evangelizer of salvation. And Jesus is that. He's the prime evangelizer. He's right with you. He's not apart from you in a work of evangelization, of new evangelism. He makes all things new. And therefore, he makes known to people yesterday, today, and forever. He doesn't get tired and say, oh, that's enough. I've done enough down there. I'm going back to home. No, he doesn't. Yesterday, today, and forever. He evangelizes us with the goodness of our Father. That's good news. That our Father is the only one that's good. The evangelizing activity of the church, everything is planned in the church. God uses his church for this work. And that's why the world isn't evangelized. The church hasn't taken it up and is not living it. You must have Christ and the church as the starting point of your new evangelization. That's where you start. You got to get this living relationship with Jesus Christ. Always. Does Jesus Christ ever depart from you? No. No, he doesn't. He's always with you. I am with you always, even to the end of time. You got to believe him. He doesn't take a vacation. He's with you always. And the church in America is increasingly speaking about Jesus Christ. The human face of God, the divine face of man. Think about that. You've got to reveal Jesus Christ. They've got to see Jesus Christ in you. They see the human face of God in you, but they see the divine face of Jesus in you too. And you see these people go, I have to be myself. No, you don't. God help us if you do. We got a problem. It is this proclamation that impacts people when they can see the human face of God in you. That person is like God. I had a man who used to travel on the trains. We used to call them the Knights of the Road. And he was a wonderful man, Jimmy Brock. And he used to come and he'd work the lawn for me, and I'd have him live with me, you know. And he was a tough guy. And he used to do the lawn, and one time a mole got in the lawn, destroyed the lawn. He was so mad. And he went up and he got a king snake. And he came into the rectory, and the seminarians turned green and yellow. He comes in with this big, long snake. He said, I'm going to get those moles. The poor seminarians, I thought they were going to have a heart attack. And so he did that. He put the snake in, and the snake got all the moles, of course, and then he took the snake back and put them in the rocks and on the heights. And he would go, and he'd go on the trains. See, they would come in because the trains came in where the parish was, and so they come in on the trains and they look for a place to stay. And so I had them stay with me. You know, we used to call them the philosophy professors for the seminarians. And so anyhow, he would go off, you know, and I got to know his sister. And one time she called me up and she said, Father, Jimmy is dying in a hospital in Omaha, Nebraska, and his kidneys have failed. And would you go up and take care of him? So I went up to him, and I said, and I took a seminarian with me at the time. I said, Jimmy, I said, you're going home. He said, no, Father, I'm not going home very soon. They told me I'm pretty sick here. And I said, no, you're going home to heaven. I said, you want to be a Catholic? He said, I always wanted to be a Catholic. When he came into me the first time, he had a knapsack, and he said, you want to see what I got in that knapsack? And he pulled out a explosive, a hand grenade. And I said, oh, don't pull the pin on it here. She said, my wife left me, I'm going to find him and I'm going to blow it to pieces. And so this time he said, yeah, I want to be a Catholic, Father. So I said, you want to be baptized? Oh, sure, Father, I'll be baptized. And so I baptized him, and I gave him all the sacraments, you know, and I gave him a little not much, but a little instruction. He had gone to Mass with us and everything when he was, and so anyhow, I knew he was dying. He had no kidneys, you know. And they were, had this, taking the poison out of his kidneys all the time, you know. So anyhow, I said to the nurse, I said, now, he's a Catholic now, and we want to have a Mass for him and bury him in the, he was in the military, so we'll bury him in Leavenworth in the military cemetery. And so anyhow, I said, when he dies, just call me and we'll come and get him and take him and have the Mass for him. And put him. So anyhow, a week goes by, 2 weeks go by, 3 weeks. I bet he shows up at that door. Sure enough, he got well. And I don't know whether the sacraments did it or Jesus did it for sure, but he said, "Hi, Father. I'm going to work on the lawn and get the flowers going again," and everything. So anyhow, he was wonderful. But then the wintertime came and he went on the trains again. And I was scared to death that he was going on the trains. I said, "Jimmy, call me up every now and then so I'll know where you are and that you're all right and everything." So the first couple of times he did that, it was fine. But then he got picked up in Houston, and they put him in jail, and he said, "My kidneys are failing, I got to have a hospitalization." Oh, they said, "You're just making up a story," and he died in the prison. And his sister called me and told me that he died in the prison because, but before he left on this journey, he said, "Father, I'm a Catholic now, I got to go to confession." So he went to confession, you know. He was ready to go. Yeah? And, you know, that's evangelization. And it's something that you've got to be cognizant of, you know. You don't just save the saved, you know. You don't just take care of all the good people that put their envelope in the collection every Sunday. You got to get the people that aren't going to church and everywhere and bring them yourself. And so you want to make, to the extent that you're working with the life of the Son of God, who wants to give everybody life and more abundant life. And that's who's working with you. You're never alone in this work of new evangelization. And you got to teach the good news to the poor. You have a priority, but not an exclusiveness. You don't only teach them to the poor, you teach them to the rich. When St. Francis Xavier was going off into mission, there was a very rich man who invited him to supper. So he went. And he didn't say a word to him about his sinful life. And the man got nervous and more nervous. And he said, "I must be in terrible condition if you don't say anything to me about my sins." So he heard his confession and then he went off. But you got to be out there and getting the lost sheep in new evangelization and bringing them in with the teachings and the Paschal mystery and all the realities of Jesus Christ, the living Jesus Christ, who's living now just as really as he lived 2,000 years ago. Now, evangelization of leadership encompasses and embraces that you must guide anything that would take people from living the gospel. Your criteria is the gospel. They gotta live the gospel. And you gotta know the gospel by heart. I was in a bookstore in Ireland once, and there was a woman who took care of the bookstore. And I asked her, I said, what do you use for meditation? What book do you use for meditation? She said, I don't use a book, Father. I said, you don't use a book for meditation? She said, no. She said, I use the scriptures. I said, well, do you use the scriptures? She said, no, I got that memorized. She had it all memorized. She didn't need any book. You got to memorize the Gospels. You can take that for a Lenten penance. Word for word. So that you know it by heart.
Just one.
The damage done by secularism is out there. Secularizing people. Take everything that's sacred out of your life. You don't need it. You can do it yourself. And where is this secularism? It's in everything. It pervades the whole atmosphere of society. It's in political life. You see, I don't want to force my Catholic ideas concerning life on people in my constituency. I'm against abortion, but if they want to abort, well, that's okay. That's not the values of the gospel. And now they can't even receive Holy Communion. Rome has said you can't receive communion if you're pro-choice. In economics, take a look at them now with Wall Street and all these companies that are failing because they cheated. They were all cheating for about 40 years. And now they're paying the price. And somebody's got to bail them out there. Bail us out, bail us out. Why didn't you stop cheating 40 years ago? Because they had a god of money. They wanted more and more and more and more and more. In the trade unions, pay them up, pay them up, pay them up. In the military, I need a promotion, pay them up. You get the promotion. In social centers, you're nothing if you don't have the money. And culturally, it's a terrible thing. They're destroying the whole culture because everything they do is a lie. They're lying to you. And for 40 years they got away with it. Now they're paying. Enron was the first one to get caught. Now they're all getting caught. And all the rest of them are afraid now they're going to get caught too. Now they're asking the government to bail them out. So they can keep cheating. Therefore, you want to see that you're called by God under the guidance and encouragement of those who serve you as your priests. They will be able to count on you to maintain fidelity to Christian values. It's amazing really to see how values have disintegrated. Americans used to be known for their word. If I gave you my word, that was it. That was it. There was a man named Stoddard who wrote on lectures, and he went to Japan, but he put his passport in his bags, and the bags went ahead of him. So he came to the immigration and he had no passport. So the Japanese immigration officer said to him, well, that's fine. You just go and get your passport and come back and show it to us. He said, you would trust me to do that? He said, certainly, you're an American. I wonder if we could say that today. See, we had a word that was our bond. We didn't have to make all the contracts, which they break all the time. Our word was our bond. You know, they get up there and say, I take this person for better or for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. And what are they all doing? They're going off and divorcing and remarrying, and they say, I take this person and no one else. They're lying before God. And when they go before God, that's what God is going to say to them. Why did you say this? Well, I didn't know she was going to be this way. Well, you told me this, that this was what you were going to do, better or worse. Well, down the other way, they're lying to God. And God's going to hold them accountable. And I've had some of them say, God understands. And I say, oh, he sure does understand. What you said to him, he understands. And he's going to hold you to it. Now, you're building a fraternal society, a family. And that's very important. And with the support of those, that easy task of evangelizing, there's updated methods, and this method of the encounter with the living Jesus Christ, conversion, communion, and solidarity, and we'll go through all of those, because you're the leaders of the people to come to those. This is to form your consciousness. See, people don't have any conscience today. They sin mightily. They're like the Lutherans. Luther said, sin mightily and Jesus will cover it. I don't believe that, and I don't think that Catholics should believe that, because it's not true. And consciousness is, for example, you got up this morning. What have you been thinking and had a consciousness of all this morning and this afternoon? What have you been thinking about yourself? Most of us spend most of our time thinking about ourselves. Is that what you're supposed to be conscious of? No. You're supposed to be conscious of the presence of Christ. That's what you're supposed to be conscious of. And you better get into Christ to be able to do that. Because if you're not in Christ, you won't keep it. You won't keep the presence of Christ. You'll be distracted by this and that and the other and everything else. So you have to examine your consciousness, not just your conscience. Oh, I didn't tell any lies, I didn't disobey, I was this, I was that. But did you have the consciousness of Jesus Christ? Every second of the time of this day? You mean I have to think about him all the time? Yes. And you have to ask yourself, would Jesus do it this way? Jesus, would you like this? Would this be better for you? What's the best you want? You have to ask him all the time. And otherwise, you don't want to be inconsistent. Jesus wasn't inconsistent. What he said, he meant. And if he didn't mean it, he didn't say it. And what about the corruption that's present today? Well, I don't have to tell you about that. It's everywhere. They're on the take. And in the government and everything else. They're on the take. And so it's corruption. The government is completely corrupted. And the political structures, you know, you pay so much money and you can have what you want. And they call it special interests. And they pay off the senators and the congressmen for their special interests. And that's what they lobby for, their special interests. And so they're paying them off. They pay off athletes. You know, when we were in the Second World War, and these athletes came from different colleges because they didn't go to, their colleges didn't have programs for military, and they had to go in the military, so they came to Notre Dame. And so they said to us, where do you get paid here? And we said, this is Notre Dame, you don't get paid here. We don't get, well, you guys are holding back on us, you know. Sure you get paid. Everybody's getting paid these days. We never get paid. We get $15 of laundry money so we can get our laundry cleaned. But that was it. Yet those men who were getting paid in the other colleges by the alumni and by everybody else, when the war was over, they came back to Notre Dame. They didn't go to those colleges. But in those colleges, they were getting paid off.